Hello and welcome into the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, TJ Mabardi. We are coming to you live on an eventful Tuesday afternoon, as just this morning we received the breaking news that the New York Jets are trading for superstar wide receiver Davante Adams, reuniting him and Aaron Rodgers. This is coming off of the heels of what was another very tough Jets loss that we will be breaking down that game as well from both the perspectives of where the Jets need to be better, and additionally, did the Bills reconcile some of their issues as they snap their losing streak and hold on to first place in the AFC East with that win last night? So we're going to be talking about the Jets and the Bills from their past 24 hours. And then we also got news that the Pittsburgh Steelers are deciding to move off of Justin Fields, at least for the time being, and Russell Wilson appears to be poised to start for the Steelers in Week 7 against none other than the New York Jets in what should be a Sunday night football game packed with storylines. So we'll talk about that Steelers decision as well, what this means for their season moving forward. And then finally, we are going to be talking about some of the MLB playoff action from last night, which saw New York dominance as the Mets and the Yankees both came out on top in their respective games. So we'll be talking about those matchups as well. But before we dive into everything, just a reminder to like, follow, subscribe wherever you may be keeping up with us. To any of our viewers, be sure to give us your thoughts on the latest happenings in sports. Use that comment section as we try and make this show as interactive as possible. Whether you have a quick comment, a thoughtful question, or whether or not you have something that you want to refute against with my opinions, let us know in the comment section. Again, as we try and make the show as interactive as possible, we value your feedback. And then additionally, if you would like to become a bigger part of the show, you can go to the link that is streaming across the bottom ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can leave a tip or donation along with a comment. Your comment will pop up on screen. You could additionally do so using the super chat feature that is available on YouTube. Anything would be very greatly appreciated there. This morning, we got the news that finally it has happened. The New York Jets are trading for superstar wide receiver Davante Adams. This was a deal that seemed like it was sort of written in the stars for weeks now. Once it was announced that Adams would be available for trade, the Jets, on the other hand, in a very, I would call it a desperate situation, understanding what their hopes are for this season. It is about winning the Super Bowl, and that's just about it. In order to do so, you have to take every shot that you can. And this is a situation with Aaron Rodgers at 41 years old. You go out, and it's been clear that he and his receivers haven't exactly been on the same page. We'll be diving into that Monday Night Football game in a little bit here, but Rodgers himself at the podium last night talking about how Mike Williams ran the wrong route, and now they go out and trade not all that much. Ian Rappaport reported that this will be a conditional third-round pick that the Jets are sending to the Raiders in exchange for Adams, and that it can become a second depending on his specific play. I don't know if we have exactly the details on that yet, but a day 2 pick for Davante Adams is a huge win for the Jets right now. And again, you want to talk about long-term implications and such. The reality is it's all about the now right now for the Jets. And they need to capitalize on a situation where they feel like overall they have the roster talent to be able to make a playoff push. Now they have the quarterback in place, but Rodgers, while he did look pretty good for the most part last night against the Bills, he has had his struggles up to this point in the year, and I think adding probably the number one receiver of his career in Davante Adams is just a bit of a no-brainer decision at this point. Does it solve all of the issues for the Jets? Absolutely not. They are still a pretty flawed team in a couple different ways, but not in any sense that I don't think it's not salvageable. Everybody talks about the offensive line, and, somewhat for good reason, because Aaron Rodgers at times has definitely been going through it. And in terms of pass block win rate, the Jets are 25th in the NFL coming out of week 6. So there are real issues there. Now, the run block win rate stat, also 28th. I do feel like there is talent on that offensive line and that they should be able to get better with a little bit more consistency and chemistry between some of these linemen, that I think it's possible to work out some of these issues. Maybe I'm, a little bit too wishful thinking there, but I think that it's salvageable there. I think that in terms of Rodgers' chemistry with the receivers, Garrett Wilson, we've seen has been a pretty consistent threat throughout this season. Now he's going to get some less looks where Aaron Rodgers has been sort of force-feeding him at times, but at the same time as well, I don't think that it's a bad thing necessarily for the development of Wilson. I feel like that team sort of understands the stakes of what this season is really for. Wilson's still playing on a rookie contract. Yes, at some point he is going to need to get that new contract extension and some of the, he's going to want the stats to back it up to secure a larger deal. But again, I think as long as inside that organization, which has had a lot of moments of shakiness throughout the course of the past couple decades, and especially as of late, I think that if they are all on the same page about truly what this season is for, then Wilson I think he's going to be understanding that he's probably going to get less touches if it results in the offense actually being a lot more sustainable. And then, like I mentioned, that's just the offensive side of the ball. I think there are issues with the Jets defense as well. The fact that, really, I have not been blown away with their run defense much at all up to this point in the season. And, they've had games where they were able to sort of show out, and some of the advanced analytics in terms of their run stop win rate would support that they are a good rushing defense. I have a little bit of hesitations last night. The fact that it wasn't even James Cook that was available for them. Ray Davis ended up being the lead back after Cook was ruled out, and the Bills were still able to run for 150 yards, average 4.5 yards per carry, or yards per attempt, and that was even including some Josh Allen kneels at the end of the game. So, I don't know. I think that the Jets still have a ways to go here, and we still don't really have much info or intel on whether or not, this new iteration of the coaching staff is going to be the one that is capable of leading this Jets team to success. For whatever it's worth, the offense did look, I think, a lot. I think it looked better overall last night. There were still issues with it, I suppose, but it was the first time that the Jets scored any points on their opening drive of the season. So, I guess there's some upside there, as we do have a comment here from Andre about how much does this trade impact Garrett Wilson's numbers, sort of like what we were just talking about. Wilson at this point, I would have to imagine, is at the top of the league in terms of targets. He had another 10 just last night. I think he had something over 20 the other day, or the last week. So I'm trying to find target leaders up to this point in the season. It to some degree was not going to entirely be sustainable for the year, that they were just, again, sort of force feeding him. I think he's at 67 targets through 6 games, where Wilson has been their best wide receiver up to this point. I think that he still will be involved in the offense, because part of the reason for this deal needing to be made is that Wilson has been getting his, but they've been largely, I would say, one-dimensional. Now, again, we're going to very shortly here be diving into the Monday Night Football game in particular, but Allen Lazard last night, I know that the majority, or about half of his yards, came on that Hail Mary pass at the end of the first half, but I thought Lazard looked pretty good as a whole last night as well. So now you're talking about Adams, Wilson, and if Lazard can give anything to you too as a third wide receiver that can also be one of the best blockers on the perimeter in the NFL as well, you're looking at a Jets offense that has a lot more room to grow. Now that offensive line is going to have to be better 100%. That for as talented of a backfield as they have, the fact that they haven't been able to, specifically on those red zone possessions around the goal line, where they just do not seem to be able to run the ball up the middle all that much in those types of situations. So really interesting situation, but so that's where we're at on the Jets here. We do have some breaking news. First off, thank you to Adam Weber here in the comments section talking about there is a new trade, wide receivers involved from the teams that were playing last night, as it appears that the Buffalo Bills have made a deal to trade for Browns wide receiver Amari Cooper. So, as we're sitting here talking about the Jets making this deal for a wide receiver, the Bills involved as well. And my first reaction is they had to make some sort of move in terms of adding another weapon. Because Josh Allen, when you look at his stats for this year, really surprising, the lack of a real yards perspective. And I think it's mostly just because he doesn't really have a necessarily great rapport. I think that he and Khalil Shakir have come a long way. I think that Dalton Kincaid is a good option for them as well. But you look at what it's looked like up to this point in the season for Josh Allen, and it's been pretty underwhelming with just 193 pass yards per game through the first 6 weeks of the season. And again, there just hadn't really seemed to be all that much chemistry or real upside with the Bills' passing attack. And now they go out and get Amari Cooper, who, has had his flaws. We mentioned on the show yesterday that Cooper, I believe, is leading the league in drops according to foxsports.com. So, it's not like Cooper is this, this flawless wide receiver that is going to change their offense entirely. But the difference is with them and the Jets, I think that the Bills have a pretty good foundation. They have one of the best offensive lines in the league. James Cook has been a very positive asset to their offense these past couple seasons. Ray Davis as well getting involved last night. And really, they were more so the ones that were missing just that one star wideout. Now they go and get Amari Cooper, who, again, I just mentioned, drops have been an issue for him this year, but I still think that he is easily now the wide receiver one on that Bills team, and I think it's going to make a huge difference for this Bills passing attack. So I really like this move, honestly. And, Andre in the comment section here saying he agrees with the move. Keon Coleman is not what they expected. The reality is Coleman was, he's a physical receiver, and I think that there is talent there. I think eventually there's some great upside for him being a more reliable red zone threat for them as well. But in terms of the dynamic ability, what you're getting from Amari Cooper on a down-to-down basis, Cooper is just more so what the Bills are needing at this current point in time. So a very surprising deal there. We're just sort of reacting to this on the fly here. It does sound like the Bills are getting Cooper and a 6th-round pick in 2025. The Browns are getting a 3rd-round pick in 2025 and a 7th in 2026. So, the Bills sort of, buying a little bit low, you could argue, on Amari Cooper. That's really not a lot to give up. And now the Bills at this point, they are first in the AFC East, and they widen that gap that much more with their win against the Jets. The Dolphins and the Patriots don't really seem to be contending for that number 1 spot in the AFC East as of right now. So the Bills, I really like getting aggressive here, making a move for a great perimeter player, and I'm very happy with this deal as well for the Bills. I think that the Bills and the Jets both got better as of this morning. So crazy that we've had this type of a shakeup with two teams that were already on the docket for us to talk about based off of that Monday night game. And that is what I want to dive into here, as well as, especially now taking into consideration the deals that these two teams have made going to be transitioning here into the Monday Night Football game itself. And we're going to be starting with the Jets here, talking about their loss, where this game went wrong for them, and what type of situation they could be walking into here moving forward with Davante Adams. But before we do so, we do have a quick fantasy trade proposal here that I want to address here from Cap for Life. He said, I just got offered Devontae Smith for Davante Adams. Do I pull the trigger? Very interesting proposition there. I think I would definitely trade for Davante Adams at this point. I'd be buying stock on him in any area that I can. He is going to get a ton of targets. I think that him and Rodgers, maybe it's a little bit of a slow start week 1, but ultimately this is Aaron Rodgers' offense that he's operating in, essentially. Just kind of calling all the shots at this point. Don't even really have a truly solidified offensive coordinator. So I would be on board with Devontae Smith for Davante Adams. Eagles offense, Davante is still going to get, Smith that is still going to get his targets there, but I would definitely be buying stock in Adams right now. And he also has another one. Do I deal Schultz, Achane, and Darnold for Burrow and Madison? That is a little bit of a grimy deal right there. Burrow and Madison, I'm not really sure what the upgrade is for you there. I'm not sure what the status is right now for Achane and his injury. Madison, I know, had, some looks this past weekend. I don't know if I love that deal. And then Commanders, Bengals, or Eagles defense, if this is for this upcoming week, I have to sort of refresh myself on what the upcoming matchups for each of these teams are, where Washington is playing the Panthers, so that is a great sign there. Don't love the Commanders' defense necessarily, but they are also playing a Panthers offense that really hasn't shown much life at all since week 3, so that's definitely an option. The Eagles as a defense as well, not really a fan of them. They're playing another poor offense in the New York Giants, so that is tenable. And then the Bengals as well. The options here aren't necessarily great, but Bengals going up against the Browns. I feel like out of those 3 options, I would have the most faith in the Commanders. But again, that's sort of all based off of matchups. And none of those defenses are ones that I would be looking to build around long term. But, with that out of the way, now we are going to be switching gears here into the Monday Night Football matchup, starting with the Jets' loss against the Bills, talking about their perspective. So we're going to be diving into that, but before we do so, we are going to take a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement. The top is so vacant. I don't need shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get my way in to be put down. It ain't your place, no, this my sound. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it. The news if it's some loose shit. It's stupid. If you choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we're now going to be diving into the Monday Night Football game from last night between the Jets and the Bills. We are going to be first looking at the perspective here from the Jets, considering they are, of course, the ones in the headlines this morning based off of the Davante Adams deal. But as we were talking about, this is a situation for the Jets where I don't think it comes down to having just one extra wide receiver. This was a pretty weird game on both sides, considering, it really did turn into a ref show at the end of that game. There were 22 penalties called total, 204 penalty yards, and I think that it really did hurt the Jets on a number of these instances, but again, you have the penalties involved, the wind is kicking, and you have Zerline and Bass both missing kicks. It was a very tough situation for a number of different reasons, which is why I do have a hard time sort of fully pinning this game on Aaron Rodgers, which some people are doing. It is a fact that Rodgers has had the ball now in 3 straight games in the fourth quarter with the chance to even the game up or go ahead. And they are 0 for 3 on scoring points on these drives dating back to the Broncos game in these 3 straight losses. So it's kind of easy to start the narrative there. I do think that there's a lot more to that as well when you look at the fact that, they were in field goal positioning on a number of opportunities down the stretch of this game. You also have a missed kick in that Broncos game as well. So, not to be an Aaron Rodgers apologist by any means, but I thought that he looked pretty good in this game, all things considered. 23 of 35, 294 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he did throw that interception that ended up being the game sealer for them, which is a tough look, absolutely. And, maybe even a little bit of a tougher look is Rodgers coming out and speaking out to the media that Mike Williams ran the wrong route in that opportunity. I have no problem with holding your teammates accountable. I don't love doing it in the public setting, the way that Rodgers went about it. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. Leadership comes in a number of different forms, and it's not like Mike Williams has proven himself at this point to be, somebody that is a prominent piece of this Jets offense. I at least got a notification earlier this morning from Bleacher Report that Mike Williams could be moved in the aftermath of this Davante Adams trade. So we'll see how things play out there. But, I thought that overall, the Jets did a pretty good job moving the ball. You get 113 yards from Breece Hall through the ground. He additionally has 56 yards through the air. And not that I want to diminish Breece Hall in terms of he is still very talented. He just kind of leaves me wanting more from him as well, though, if that's fair to say. I thought that the 2 biggest plays for him in terms of there was the halfback toss for him that opened him up for that 42-yard gain. There was a screen play for him as well that broke for 24 yards. And on both of those, I really thought it was the blocking up front. And that is where I understand this offensive line hasn't been great up to this point in the season. But I think that there are moments here, and it helps as well. You have a lot of veterans on that offensive line. Morgan Moses playing his first game back from injury. You had so many moving pieces, 3 new starters on that O-line coming into the year, that I think it's possible to build up some more chemistry and for them to look better down the stretch of the year. When I was looking this morning as well, Morgan Moses was in that upper echelon in terms of offensive tackles based off of pass block win rate. He is tied for 10th in terms of success rate at 93%. So, a little bit of something to maybe hope for. And that is a good Bills defense that they faced off against last night. And I think that, we saw the Bills be able to get gashed in that Ravens game, but really outside of that, they've been performing far above the expectations all year long. And, I understand Rodgers took some hits, ended up getting sacked 3 times, which is something you would absolutely love to avoid as much as possible. AJ Epinesa with 2 of those for the Bills. But, you have some good edge rushers as well on the other team. And I thought that they held their own as much as they really could have. I think ultimately my biggest concern about the Jets in this game, and their defense did play well for the most part, limited the Bills to just 3 points in the second half, is I'm still not sold on them in terms of being a good run-stopping defense, where Ray Davis last night goes for 97 yards. This is as James Cook is scratched just about an hour or so before the game kicks off then, and more times than not, we have seen the Jets struggle against the run. Now, the advanced statistics in terms of run block win rate, they are, in a pretty good position, all things considered. But I think you look at the teams that they were able to more so shut down the run against. It was against the Vikings without their starting running back in Aaron Jones. We saw the Broncos and just an absolute slugfest there. Broncos aren't necessarily a team known for their run. The Patriots as well, especially at that point with Jacoby Brissett. I think I just need to see a little bit more from them. This should be a good test this upcoming weekend against the Steelers, where the Steelers aren't necessarily elite on the ground, but Najee Harris is coming off of his best game of the season, so that'll definitely be something at least of note to take into consideration with this game. But for the Jets as a whole, in terms of what does this loss mean for them, I think that they're very much still alive in the season. Now, I do think that the better team won last night in the Bills. The Jets may have outplayed the Bills to some degree in the second half, but roster for roster, I am still favoring the Bills over the Jets. But that doesn't mean that this season is over for the Jets. They're 2-4, which is absolutely not where you would hope that they were coming into the season. But something that I continue to sort of highlight in these discussions is the fact that there really aren't super intimidating teams holding those wild card spots at this point. I believe the top three right now are the Steelers, the Chargers, and then either the Colts or the Broncos. I don't have the exact picture pulled off in front of me at this point. None of those teams the Jets should be scared of. The biggest thing is the Jets just being able to overcome themselves. And I think that they showed signs of growth last night, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, the way that they were able to move up and down the field. They probably should have won this game if it weren't for some kicking woes in this. So, understandably, a very frustrating loss for the Jets, but I don't think by any means that the season is over here. They're 2-4. They just reloaded with one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and they have a chance here with some softer opponents in these next few weeks that they could really begin to ramp up. Now, I mentioned already, Sunday Night Football against the Steelers this upcoming week should be a game packed with storylines. We have some news on the Steelers front with a quarterback change there that sort of plays into the entertainment value of what that game should bring. But I think it's a very winnable game. Then they're facing the Patriots as well in Week 8. That's a very winnable game. A little bit of a litmus test for sure against the Texans. That game at home, where I'm not calling that game winnable by any means. Thursday night game there should be a fun one, I would say that. But then it's the Cardinals and the Colts, two okay teams as well. So I think 4 of the next 5 games are winnable for the Jets, and then they have a bye week going into Seahawks, Dolphins, Jaguars, and Rams. So I do think that the Jets ultimately make the playoffs this season as a wild card team, maybe with the chance to be a little bit higher. But I think that last night, as much as it is a frustrating loss, I think they're headed in the right direction from here on out. Now, it's going to be a lot of the part contingent on the idea of, will that offensive line be able to get it together? Will Davante Adams have the impact that we think it will moving forward? And then, can that defense really fully solidify themselves as a great group? Now, the fact that you have Ulbrich, he is now, moved on from play calling duties with that defense, I believe, and he's, taking on the interim head coach role. I mean, he voiced frustrations about how the defense played following that game, and I think it's just about continuing to sort of build on any sort of moral victory they have, which I feel like Jets fans should be optimistic about their chances moving forward here. Now we'll see about some of the injuries. Suffered a couple last night in the secondary. It was their starting safety, and it was DJ Reed as well. Both of them ended up going down in the game. So, we will have to see whether or not it's Chuck Clark was the starting safety that they lost as well. So, we'll see what the severity is there. I do think that this defense can sort of bounce back. I think it's in them. I personally would have liked to see more from them up to this point in the year. And I think that their offense is going to be able to take off from here as well. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. We're going to now be pivoting and looking at the other side of this Monday night matchup and the Buffalo Bills, who were also in pretty desperate need of a win, coming off of two pretty brutal losses, and they are able to sort of, let everybody know that not full panic needs to ensue, that they are still leading that division. And now, this morning, they make a deal as well, along with the Jets, to sort of improve their wide receiver core. So we're going to be diving into takeaways from them from last night and where they stand moving forward here now with Amari Cooper on their roster. But before we do so, we are going to take a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we're now going to be diving into the Buffalo Bills situation, as they are coming off of a Monday Night Football win against the New York Jets. And just as of 30 minutes ago or so, we got the news that they are adding to their team, trading for wide receiver Amari Cooper. And I think that this was the right deal for them. Last night, overall, I thought was a pretty good game for them. You can absolutely make the argument that they could have very easily come out of that game with a loss had the Jets, just sort of executed better down the stretch, especially with those missed field goals. But I continue to be impressed with the way that the Bills have come out early on in this season. And I know the losses against the Ravens and the Texans were very ugly for them. And I think coming out of that as well, sort of tying this into, the news of this afternoon, is the fact that they really were without a legitimate number one option for Josh Allen, and he was feeling that, where he has had moments of excellence up to this point in the year. I mean, through the first few weeks, it was looking like he was going to be the front runner for MVP before the recent, fall off of sorts, but I still think he is playing pretty good football overall. And that being said, as much as he's playing well, he's not turning the ball over for the most part. He did have a fumble in the red zone that almost was very costly for them, but, they were able to at least get back on it. I believe they ended up capping off that drive with a touchdown as well. So, maybe get out of some of those mistakes. Josh Allen still has a little bit of that wild factor in his DNA, but 0 interceptions through 6 weeks. That has been one of the biggest complaints and critiques of him over the past handful of years, and he is playing smarter with the football. Now, part of that in turn is the fact that he hasn't been as aggressive and he hasn't been putting up the same yardage as the offense has been a little bit more sluggish. Josh Allen is passing for just 193 pass yards per game, which is his lowest mark since 2019. Now, we're only 6 games into the season, so there is time to resurrect this, but clearly this Bills offense was not operating at the same degree as what the organization was hoping for coming into this year. In steps Amari Cooper, who, we'll see exactly what type of impact that he has. I think that there are, if you're going to compare it to the Jets deal with Davante Adams, yes, clearly Amari Cooper is not quite that level, but the Bills at least get a more consistent threat out on the perimeter, where last night you look at it, and even with Josh Allen feeling like he was controlling the game early on, he accounted for all 3 of the touchdowns that the Bills scored in the first half. He still finished the game with just 215 yards. Now again, playing mistake-free, which is a big step for Josh Allen, especially if there aren't going to be quite as many of those big plays. I mean, we've still seen some of them. There was, of course, the one scrambling out of his own end zone, hitting Ray Davis down the field. But, when Ray Davis, your running back, is your leading receiver with 55 yards, it's not quite going... the offense isn't functioning at the level that they were hoping for. And they needed to actually go out and get a perimeter threat. Khalil Shakir is somebody that I do like, and I think he has been emerging for the Bills step by step, really from about halfway through the 2023 season. Wasn't enough, though, clearly. So they get a little bit aggressive, and, they ultimately, I was just looking during the break there, and they're not going to be on the books for much of Cooper's contract at all here, where I want to pull up some of the reporting here from, Field Yates, the fact that Cooper had just restructured a deal, and the Bills are only going to be paying him $807,000 for this season. So a pretty nice cheap pickup, especially considering they're trading a 3rd and a 7th round pick, I believe it is. One in 2025, one in 2027. This is immediate help for them. To what degree, we will have to see ultimately, but I think it's a win for them. But the reason why I think I have been so optimistic about the Bills is because they have been able to function without Josh Allen being a total superstar that's dominating everything. I mean, their running attack over the past season and a half now has been much improved with James Cook as the lead back for them, but even last night, he's not available. He's dealing with a toe foot injury. Ray Davis comes in and, 20 carries, 97 yards, averaging almost 5 yards per carry. He's involved in the passing game a little bit as well. They have a very good offensive line, now a reliable enough rushing attack. And then you look at the defense as well, and for however much turnover they had from last year to this year, it's not just that they're surviving these games, but their defense actually is playing very well, in my opinion. And it starts with the secondary, because that's where they lost so many pieces from last season. And now you look at it, you have Damar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp, who are emerging into actual starting caliber safeties, where, Rapp was sort of flying all over the field last night. Hamlin as well, involved in some crucial plays. You look at, they got nickelback Taron Johnson back from injury, and he ends up having the game-sealing interception against Rodgers late in that 4th quarter. So, this is actually now a very talented Bills defense, and they're definitely lacking some experience coming into this year, but, again, Rapp, Hamlin, Johnson, you have from the linebacker position as well. They haven't even really missed Matt Milano. Against that Ravens game, yes, definitely, and the fact that they were also without their other starting linebacker in Terrell Bernard, who is since back and playing pretty well for them. But Dorian Williams, a second-year linebacker, I believe, out of Tulane, that they're yeah, second-year linebacker out of Tulane. He's definitely been catching my eye in terms of how he sort of flies around in that front seven. Don't know what he can provide from a coverage standpoint at this point. It's not like I've grinded a ton of film on him, but he stood out as well. They have good edge rushers on the front line. They have, at least a man in the middle to, some degree or whatnot on that defensive side of the ball with Ed Oliver this is a pretty impressive Bills group, and I've definitely come around on Sean McDermott as a coach based off of what he's been able to help this Bills defense into. And now that they have Amari Cooper, this is a situation where I feel like they can really start to take leaps forwards at this point. Now again, Amari Cooper, it's not like he is a top 10 wide receiver in the league, at least as of this current moment, in my opinion. If you disagree in the comment section, feel free to let me know. But I do think that, being able to add a more dynamic perimeter player, that brings back the passing attack a little bit more. That's where I think we can see Khalil Shakir succeed a little bit more. Obviously, so much attention on Stephon Diggs last year. And, it's not like Shakir's been invisible for them this season. But I think at this point in his career at least, where it's still a young career, but I think that we do understand that Shakir probably has some ways to go before being a legitimate number one wide receiver if he ever does reach that. Keon Coleman as well, the wide receiver out of Florida State that they drafted this past season. I wasn't huge on Coleman coming into this year. I think he has all the physical tools and, he needs to sharpen up in terms of the route running aspect of things. He eventually can be a weapon for them, but he's more of an explosive play guy for them at the current moment. They need more players that can be on a down-to-down basis a threat. And I feel like, honestly, Cooper and Dalton Kincaid are going to be the two who can sort of emerge as those reliable pieces for Josh Allen as they try and, push forward here. But, I think they're in a very good position. And, again, overall last night, was it the most convincing win in the world for the Bills? Definitely not. But I think there's also still a lot to build on, and really, they just this morning addressed what I believe is the biggest issue with this Bills team, and that is the lack of receiving weapons for them. So, we'll see how this ages, but again, this is a low-risk move for the Bills, addresses their number one need at this current point, and it's coming off of the heels of them beating their number one competitor for the division in the AFC East this year. I think the Bills are in a great position as of this current moment, and I'm excited to see sort of what Cooper in this offense looks like. But let me know what your thoughts are, both on last night's win and the Amari Cooper deal that was just broken this morning. But it has just been crazy news flying off the shelves for us as we talked about Adams and the trade to the Jets. We're talking about Cooper to the Bills. And then sort of under the radar with all of this is the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers are also making a change, this time at quarterback, where despite starting the season 4-2 and Justin Fields playing pretty well up to this point, the Steelers are now, with Russell Wilson fully healthy, making the switch back to him for their upcoming game against the Jets in Week 7. So we are going to be evaluating whether or not this is the right decision as of this current moment and what the Steelers' offense could look like with Russell Wilson in comparison to what we saw from Fields through the first 6 weeks. So we are going to be diving into that, but before we do so, we are going to take a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as it has been an action-packed NFL news slate today, and sort of under the radar is going the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers are making a change at quarterback where they are planning on starting Russell Wilson this upcoming week in the team's game against the Jets. Sort of caught me off guard. This is something that, at least in the back of our heads, I feel like we knew that this was a possibility. The Steelers had never ruled that out, but they're not directly comparable situations, but I was thinking back to last year when they decided to go with Mason Rudolph over Kenny Pickett down the final stretch of the season. At that point, in different parts of the year right now, not directly comparable, but Mason Rudolph was helping the Steelers win games. And I thought that was, yes, he probably outplayed Kenny Pickett to some degree, but I don't think that Kenny Pickett was terrible. Maybe that's a hot take. I know not a lot of people agree with that. But point being, it was mostly, I thought, about the results of the wins and losses and putting the team in position to win, which Justin Fields has done for the most part this season, where they're off to a 4-2 start. Has he been perfect? Definitely not. But overall, this has been a pretty successful year for him. And for them to call on Russell Wilson in this situation, considering that the team is sort of rolling at this point, definitely caught me off guard. Now, it was Tom Pelissero of NFL Network was the one who initially reported on this. He said that Wilson is going to be getting the first team reps throughout this week to put him in position to be the starter for Sunday Night Football against the Jets. It hasn't exactly been confirmed of whether or not he will ultimately get the start. Tomlin also hasn't ruled out the idea of playing both quarterbacks at some point. And then an interesting quote from him where, according to Tom Pelissero here, in reference to moving away from Fields despite a 4-2 start, Tomlin said, quote, "You have to have your foot on the gas at all times," which I do respect as a mindset. It is early enough in the season. The Steelers do have a little bit of a cushion as well, for whatever it's worth, sitting at 4-2, to the point where they can't really afford, to some degree, to be entirely closed-minded on this. It should be, an open competition to some degree. Now, I personally don't agree with this decision at this current point, but again, it's hard for me to, say wholeheartedly you have gone 4-2 up to this point in the season. You have to stick with Fields. I don't think that it's quite that black and white. I personally would have started with Fields based off of what I've seen from him playing football, but it's also hard for me as somebody who is just watching these games on TV and, keeping up with the practice things, but someone who's not actually in the building. I think it's hard to definitively say on the other end of it that this is the wrong decision. Now, again, this doesn't sound like definitively Wilson is 100% locked into starting this week, or that moving forward he will absolutely be the starter for the Steelers from this point out in the season. Because I do think the fact that both of these players are in their first season with the Steelers organization actually makes balancing this back and forth a little bit easier. When you're talking about a young quarterback in his first or second year and you yank him out of the starting lineup, sort of like a Bryce Young situation, I think that transition to sort of then getting Bryce Young back under center and hopefully, having him grow along the way to becoming the franchise starting quarterback again is a little bit unrealistic. As for Fields and Wilson, they both knew that they were going to be sharing this quarterback room together and that it was going to be contested. And in order to, hold on to the job, you were going to have to, you would have to get to the point where it's not even an option. And Justin Fields, while he's played well, and I think he provides a lot of value for this Steelers offense, there have been moments of slippage and such, and Justin Fields is still a young quarterback that especially, the reason he's not in Chicago right now is because there were too many of those lapses that kind of forced the Bears' hands to some degree to pass on a quarterback in 2 consecutive years with the number 1 overall pick. And, I do, like I mentioned, I do think that I like Justin Fields better as the starting quarterback for the Steelers. I am not high on Russell Wilson at this point in his career. He will probably go down as a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. But at this point in his career, I'm not sure quite what he provides that Justin Fields doesn't. Now, if there were one area where I were to be, I'd say the most critical of Justin Fields this season is that there has been a lot of inconsistency for Fields when throwing over the middle of the field. And that is sort of an element that has been, you could argue, a little bit handicapping. Now, overall, Fields is taking some deeper shots down the field. We've seen, especially as of the past few weeks, that he has been connecting on some of these downfield throws. But when you look at the Steelers' offense right now, I don't love their offensive line. It's something that I've been pretty passionate about, this entire year. And gonna double check here what pass block win rate looks like for them. I don't think it's good. It is 24th as of, heading into week 7. And I think that a lot of it is because of the fact that the offensive line, frankly, a lot of inexperience on the line. I don't know how great some of the players in particular are. Not that we need to run through offensive line index at this current moment, but I think it's a little bit of a shaky group. They have been doing a good job running the ball, though, and I don't know if Fields is posing enough of a passing threat to sort of open up that run game quite to the extent that the Steelers are maybe hoping for. Now, the flip side of that is the fact that Fields does have the mobility where he can lean into that rushing attack, and you look at the way that the Steelers use him, he has been doing a lot of damage on the ground up to this point in the year, and you look at this past start against the Raiders where overall I thought he was pretty good. It's not like the passing numbers were outstanding for him, but a lot of moments where you see him and the value that mobility brings, where he finishes the game with 59 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. It's not, out of this world necessarily, but he leans into the brand of football that maybe the Steelers are best suited for in prioritizing that run game, where, they're running speed options with him on 3rd and short. He's able to break a couple scrambles on, 2nd and long situations to either pick up the first altogether or make it a 3rd and short. There were a couple instances like that. There was one play in particular, as I sort of relate this back to the offensive line, where it was late in the first quarter, where they called a play, starting right tackle for the Steelers, Broderick Jones, clearly just did not know what the play was, just sort of took 2 steps out upfield and stood there and didn't touch anybody. It allowed Max Crosby to get a free rush off of that end, and Justin Fields immediately recognizes that and just scrambles up the middle for a 14-yard gain. Those are things that I don't think Russell Wilson will have the same capabilities of. In his career, he's been known to be able to use his legs as well. I'm just not sure if it has... if he has that same, I would say pretty confidently, he does not have the same speed as Justin Fields at this point in their respective careers. And I don't know. It's going to be interesting. When you think about what Wilson could do to sort of elevate this offense to a next level, it's the throwing the ball over the middle of the field, which Fields really hasn't been great at. He should have had an interception in this past game in the red zone where he tried to go over the middle and he threw it right into the hands of Raiders linebacker Davante Adams. Now that play ends up getting wiped off the board because of a roughing the passer penalty, but it was a poor decision and a poor throw while he was under pressure, so he ends up getting away with that at least. But, you have moments where Fields has had a little bit of trouble throwing over the middle to some degree. He had a pick in trying to think what game it was exactly as well. It was, I can double check this on the fly here, because it was the game that he ended up hitting Calvin Austin for the game-winning touchdown. A lot of these games sort of meshing together. I believe it was that Chargers game in particular where he had an interception in that one as well, where he was trying to look over the middle of the field and just was not a great decision, ended up getting popped up there. So, again, it's not like Fields is flawless, but I think ultimately when you talk about this conversation, it's not so much the level of play and quite that. I think that Fields and Wilson ultimately are on a similar tier, if not the same tier, in terms of what level of quarterback are they. I think at this point it's about evaluating who is the better fit for what the Steelers can currently run. And it's going to be very interesting to see Fields if he does, Wilson, if he does get the start this Sunday, what he's able to do with his opportunity. Because at this point, I would imagine that the leash is probably pretty short for Wilson. That, like I mentioned at the top of this segment, as of right now, the Steelers being 4-2 and being in a wild card position, it almost does give the Steelers a little bit of a benefit of not having to lock themselves into any current position. I think that in the next few weeks is when they are going to 100% have to know. And Tomlin still has not named an official starting quarterback for the Steelers this upcoming season. It's about what they can do from here. And Wilson is probably going to have some chances to win it in these coming weeks. Now, a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of the defenses that they're playing. The New York Jets are in Sunday Night Football this week. All eyes are going to be on him. This is probably going to be an extremely watched football game. I feel like one of the highest viewed, we're probably in for one of the higher viewed primetime games at this upcoming weekend, with Wilson starting for the Steelers, Davante Adams being traded to the Jets. So it'll be an interesting one there. Then it's a game against the New York Giants, whose defense is also playing pretty well for the most part. Then a bye week, you have Washington and Baltimore. And I think probably, ideally, by that week 9 bye week, you have to know, I think, at least coming out of week 11 against the Ravens. But again, we'll see how the Steelers decide to play this, as we are going to take one last final break, but before we do so, I want to address a comment here from Anthony Manzano saying, with this trade for Davante Adams, for me, I feel like it signals at the Jets. Don't really think that receiver that recently drafted from Ohio State as a number one, probably in reference here to Garrett Wilson. I am a believer in Garrett Wilson. I think he is a very good player. I think that also, though, you have seen Wilson and Rodgers sort of struggle to fully get on the same page at times this year. And I think that relationship has improved over the course of these past few weeks. And Wilson ultimately, I think, is, at the very top of the league in terms of receptions at this point. I can, double check myself on that. I don't want to be talking out of the side of my head here. But, in terms of receptions, Wilson is second, and he is number 1 by 9 in terms of targets. So that's wide receiver 1 production, especially, with a couple, 20-plus yard receptions and, a few touchdowns in there as well. But I think that the Jets are also at a point where it's kind of do or die for them this season. Maybe you get Aaron Rodgers for next season as well. I think that Wilson is going to have a very bright future in front of him as a wide receiver, and he's probably going to get paid as a wide receiver 1 when he's ultimately eligible. But as of right now, Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers, yeah, they haven't played together for a couple of seasons. I trust that there's enough experience there in terms of the relationship that they have that he is going to just be that much better. And I think he can help Garrett Wilson along the way as well. But again, let us know what your thoughts are in the comment section, as it's been a lot of New York on the show today, and that is going to carry into our final segment, as we're going to be looking at the MLB playoffs, where last night we saw 2 New York teams come out on top again, as the New York Mets and New York Yankees won their respective games in the championship series prior to the World Series. So we're going to be diving into each of those games and talk about where these teams stand, where these series stand after the first couple games. So we're going to be diving into all of that. But before we do so, we are going to take our final break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back. Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast for our final segment of the day, where we're going to be diving into yesterday's MLB playoff action, where we saw some New York supremacy as the Mets bounced back, as they always seem to do, of course. After a disappointing Game 1 loss, they came back in Game 2, and their offense got on the Dodgers from the jump, ended up putting up 6 runs in the first 2 innings, thanks to, as well, another grand slam from the Miracle Mets, as it was Vientos once again proving that this is a situation where he is going to be a franchise cornerstone for this Mets team. So a lot of optimism there. And then the other game, of course, as well, that we're going to be diving into is the Yankees coming out on top against the Guardians. But I do want to start with the Mets in the National League. This was a situation where coming into the game, kind of felt like a lot of people were starting to write off the Mets. I don't know if I would go quite that far for myself as well, but, you know, there were doubts starting to creep in. Has the Mets magic worn off? And the answer is no. And it's always, when you do write them off, that they are able to shine the brightest. It was a Francisco Lindor home run in the first inning, and then, of course, in that second inning as well, being able to lay it on the Dodgers a little bit. The Dodgers going with a bullpen game in this one, and a little bit controversial in terms of the ways that they went about it, because, you know, we saw the Dodgers just last week win a Game 4 elimination game with a bullpen day of using an opener and just sort of riding from there. This situation, obviously different because they have a little bit more so the upper hand, winning Game 1 in pretty convincing fashion, but I really didn't love the way that the Dodgers went about, managing this game in terms of the usage of their pitchers, where they end up sending out Landon Knack to pitch that second inning, and, you know, traditionally a little bit of a bulk guy for them, but I mean, when they had success against the Padres in Game 4, it was just sort of about throwing out your great arms and lining up the matchups correctly in a way that favor you. And in this situation, I thought that they sort of strung Knack out a little bit too long. I understand, you know, the other sides of it as well. This is now a 7-game series as opposed to a 5-game series. You have more time to be able to, you know, take your games when they're there, and I don't know if it was just that they were waving the white flag on this game, but for that situation, to have Knack stay out there for that bases loaded there with a good player in Vientos at the plate to really sort of burst this game open, I just don't love sticking it out there. Like, it kind of just felt like the Dodgers didn't come into this game taking it all that seriously. You look in the 9th inning as well, where they have a situation where they let Pete Alonso steal a base from them. He ends up scoring off of that as well. And, that's at the top of the 9th inning. You follow that up in the bottom of the 9th, and, Dodgers within reach at that point, you get a couple men on base where it's Bader and it's where you have Bader and Taylor get on base for you. You have opportunities, and instead this is not Bader and Taylor, excuse me. It was Pajes and Ohtani. I don't know what I was thinking there, but have them get on base, and Mookie Betts coming up to the plate. Like, this is something that has been talked about, at least the idea that, it's a very different at-bat for Edwin Diaz at that point if Mookie is the game-tying run versus, at that point, nothing, really, because he could have gone yard there and the Mets still would have been winning. So, I didn't really feel like the Dodgers came in with the idea of playing their A-ball, and that's definitely not what we got from them ultimately. Now, of course, credit the Mets, because the Mets do continue to respond every time they feel like they're getting backed up into a corner, and they usually do it in loud fashion, of course, with a couple homers in this game to do so. You get a good enough start out of Sean Manaea as well. Runs into some trouble in the 6th inning. That's where the Dodgers have a little bit more of a chance to work their way back into the game. They ultimately get a couple runs out of it, but they don't quite, build off of it necessarily. They, like I mentioned, they get a couple runs. Ultimately, Kike grounds into a double play. That's that. But I understand it's a long series and everything. Now 7 games, especially coming off of 3 in the wild card, 5 in the divisional round. But especially with this Mets team in particular, I would just be so hesitant to let them get and build up any type of momentum. And it kind of feels like that's what they did. Now, maybe they saved some of their better bullets because they weren't throwing out their A-list relief pitchers, but I just don't know if I really liked the approach from Dave Roberts in this game. But, let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section, whether or not I am being harsh. But I really don't think so, especially considering the fact that, maybe you don't want them to get looks at your best pitchers out of the bullpen, but also, you have the rest going on your side as well. I just feel like even for that 2nd inning, bring somebody in for Knack at that point, and ultimately, if Vientos makes a big play and is able to drive in a few runs, I suppose at that point, it just kind of is what it is, and you can maybe be a little bit more lax throughout the game from that point. But I don't know. I feel like this was a game where the Dodgers could have been a lot more competitive. Again, like I mentioned, the offense had a couple of opportunities in that 6th inning and in that 9th inning. They ultimately give you some run production. You have Max Muncy as well with a solo shot in the 5th inning, I believe it was. So, it's not like this was a rollover and die game from the Dodgers, but it felt like there was a little bit less intensity than they probably should have approached the game with. But again, let me know in the comments section whether or not you think I'm being too critical there. But on the American League side of things, it is the Yankees coming out on top with a 5-2 win against the Cleveland Guardians. We just continue to see really this pitching staff dominate, and it was big for the Yankees having Carlos Rodon bounce back and have a much better start than we previously saw against the Royals in this game. 6 innings pitched, 3 hits allowed, 9 strikeouts, 1 earned run. Not bad whatsoever. The bullpen continues to dominate. Clay Holmes and Luke Weaver, really the two at the epicenter of that. You see Weaver step in as well in a big moment late in the game as well. In the 8th inning, they end up calling upon him, and you have Stephen Kwan end up hitting an RBI single as Kwan continues to really be the only reliable form of offense right now for this Cleveland team. But then the Yankees call on Luke Weaver 5 outs, and he is able to get through Cleveland pretty easily, all things considered. Yeah, walked to Lane Thomas to lead off the 9th inning, but other than that, you look at 4 out of the 5 outs that he recorded were strikeouts plus a ground out as well in that 8th inning to sort of to get out of that damage. And with runners on the corners, I mean, very impressive what Luke Weaver has been able to do in this new role for the Yankees at this point. And, you get some offensive production. Juan Soto with a big game himself, a couple hits, a home run, a walk that he was able to produce for them. Really still not getting a whole lot of Aaron Judge in this game. Another hitless one. Now at least he was able to draw a walk and ended up, scoring. So it's not like he was, total radio silence in this one, but still hitting just 133 up to this point in the playoffs and, slugging 200. You think that eventually it's going to come around for Judge, and I mean, I do at least. I feel like they probably get to that point, but I mean, as long they're staying alive without him as well, which makes me think that they could be that much more dangerous, but have to eventually see Judge turn that corner. And you look at overall where the Yankees stand right now, and I don't mean to at all disrespect the Guardians or I guess the Royals as well in that, but the Yankees definitely, when it got to the divisional series and understanding that it was the Yankees and 3 AL Central teams, I mean, year of the AL Central, give them their respect, but also realistically, in terms of World Series contenders, I don't think that any of these teams necessarily lived up to that bill. Maybe it's a little bit different if the Guardians at least have their ace in Shane Bieber, but I don't know. I mean, this feels like it is the Yankees at least series to lose, and then from there, I mean, we'll see. The Mets and the Dodgers, definitely both formidable opponents on that end of the bracket as well, but this feels like the best chance that the Yankees have to win the World Series in years. You could say at minimum at least since 2017, but I think it probably even extends a little bit longer than that as well. But Yankees in the driver's seat for this series. If the Guardians are going to be able to bounce back, number one is they need to get something out of this offense. That they had been going on 18 consecutive scoreless innings at one point during that series at the beginning of the series against the Tigers. They break out of that at least with some timely hitting in the last 2 games of that series to be able to come back and win those. Their pitching at least was able to step up for them as well in a couple of those games. But I mean, they really don't have a chance if they're not going to be able to at least give you something. And then as well, you look at the start that you get out of Alex Cobb. Can't be having, outings like that where Cobb, from the first inning, I mean, allowed a couple singles, was ultimately able to work around that, get out of there with minimal damage. But then you look as well with the wild pitches, driving in some runs for them, the bases loaded. This was a little bit of a nightmare game to some degree from the Guardians, and yet still felt like they had a chance in that 8th inning when they were putting together the rally. So it's an uphill battle for them, but on the bright side, I mean, it is a 7-game series. I feel like from games 4 and 5 of the divisional series that maybe they're building up a little bit of momentum in terms of their offense being able to at least pose a threat. We'll see about that. They do face off against the Yankees tonight, and it's going to be Garrett Cole versus Tanner Bybee. So we'll see whether or not, again, just limiting the self-induced mistakes in terms of defensively and pitching, and then got to get something from the offense at some point. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Remember to like, follow, subscribe wherever you may be keeping up with us. Be sure to check us out on social media as well for more exclusive short content. But that is all we have for today. We will see you tomorrow afternoon, same time as always at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern. Have a great day. Take care.
Mm-hmm. 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 Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.